Hinduism declares the feminine energy as Shakti, the power and energy which breathes life into the universe. Hindu women are considered to embody this Shakti. She is the symbol of purity and piety. She is the symbol of courage and strength. She is the symbol of determination. She is the symbol of immense love and care.
Indians come from a very patriarchal society. It's always been the man at the top.
I'm not going to be a typical Indian woman. I'm not going to be the type of person or wife or mother that's going to be able to wake up every morning, make sure the house is clean, cook your 3 meals a day, have your kids, bring them up. I can't give you that.
All I knew is I wanted a family and I wanted to be married with lots of children so I don't have to experience loneliness again. And that's why I got married when I was 19.
I didn't foresee having a problem in marriage or being uncomfortable in my home.
In Hinduism, there's so much of societal pressure that two-parent home is the norm, and you just take care of your family, hell or high water, you weather the storm.
When you go through a physical and emotional abuse, there comes a point in your life where you can't take it anymore. I am Aarti Nanak Chand Shannon. I matriculated in 1965. That time, high schools were full. All we wanted was an education. Many of us went on from high school to become doctors and lawyers. Most of us became teachers. I've been teaching Hindi for most of my life, and ended up studying Sanskrit and the Sanskrit mantras, and that's why I'm a priest.
I'm Jessica Gounden. I'm an attorney in private practice for the past 19 years. I'm a commissioner of the Small Claims Court. When I was growing up, the world was so different in terms of empowering young women. So I didn't have any ambitions to say, well, I want to grow up, I want to do this. We just knew we had to work, to earn a living. And there was not much encouragement for young girls to say, go and study. Now, for the young girls around me, their moms were busy trying to find a suitable life partner for them and get them settled, and the goal was always to get a rich man. And my mother, who was illiterate, she had only been to class 2 and she could barely even sign her own name. She saw the value in education, and she saw that I was excelling at school. And she was the one that encouraged me. She lit this fire because I was so thirsty for knowledge and reading and that sort of thing. So she lit this fire and she said, you should further your studies. And you must know I come from a very poor background and there was no money saved.
My name is Veena Govender. I am a businesswoman, I am a mom, and I am a philanthropist trying to change lives on a daily basis. Growing up in a very rural town in northern KZN was, in terms of my dreams, I didn't really have a dream. All I wanted to do was be happy, have this lovely family that I did have at that stage, and just grow up being a happy individual.
I'm Pratika Ramdani. I am a dynamic, enthusiastic, sometimes overachiever, and I'm currently practicing as an attorney. During pregnancy, my mom was diagnosed with German measles. It was diagnosed a bit too late, As a result of that, I was born with both a visual and hearing impairment. In terms of the visual impairment, medically I've got 10% vision. The hearing impairment on my right-hand side, I've got a deformed ear and no hearing whatsoever. On the left-hand side, I've got 70% of hearing. My parents are the most supporting parents. They've been there with me through every step of the way. And I haven't been easy to live with all these challenges. Because yes, I had the visual and hearing impairment for the most part of my life. When I was diagnosed with a heart condition, rheumatic heart disease basically means if you get a flu or any virus, it could settle on your heart valves and they could perish. So the second you pick up an infection or something, you need to go under serious treatment. Being a kid, being in school, I was always picking up infections, always going into high temperature, phases. So parents had to leave, my dad particularly, rushing 1, 2 in the morning from Durban to Pietermaritzburg, taking me to a doctor, getting me treated, Wasn't easy. Mom, on the other hand, had 3 tiny kids to take along because I have an older brother and a younger sister. It was not easy for them, but they've made life-sacrificing decisions to help me get to where I am.
Mr. Chair, I'm sure that it's
I know when I was diagnosed with lupus in August, when they confirmed, yes, I have to go under treatment and whatnot. On the drive home, it was a nice sunny day, because it was like the only sunny day I could remember for that year. And I was like looking out the window, and the thing that went through my head was, God, I don't know why you chose me to go through this after everything I've been through, but just help me get through it. You've got me so far. I'm not prepared to give up now. I got goals and I would like to achieve it before whatever plans you have for me work out. Because remember, at that time, the things you were told about lupus was frightening. Now it may be well known. Back then it was just an occurring illness. It was rare. Treatment was trial and error. So there was no guarantee if I was going to live 6 months, a year, 3 years, 5 years. I just know I have this illness. I'm just supposed to drop everything, go for treatment and sleep as much as I could. That's what I was told. Rest, sleep. And I was at the prime of my life.
I'll never forget this photo here. This is the year you got graduated. 2 years later, after losing your memory, and you didn't want to attend your graduation because all your friends had graduated before you. You was feeling embarrassed. And I remember I used to speak to you every day, motivate you. This is the best day of your life. This is what you dreamt of. And you achieved it.
Growing up, I never ever considered being a mother or being a wife, or even both. I think for me, I felt like, no one's going to be interested, so I'm not even going to think about it and get my hopes up, because people don't look towards differently abled people as they would look in the mirror. When it comes to differently abled people, they believe that maybe they should just be shunned, in a way, unspoken of. It's like taboo. I was fortunate, though, to come from a family where they encouraged me to speak about my challenges. They encouraged me to be the best that I could be within my limitations. And with the family support and, the friends that I've had, even now with my employer's support, I've been able to achieve much more than I thought I would have.
We're planning your wedding. We're going to be faced with a whole lot of challenges. We've got to decide now what type of wedding you require.
I never thought, yes, I'm going to get married. Yes, I'm going to have kids. It took me by surprise. When I'm in a relationship now, I'm engaged. But my biggest fear was, am I going to be accepted for the fact that I wouldn't be your typical Indian daughter-in-law or typical Indian wife or mother for that sake. There's no guarantee I can have kids. It would be a very difficult thing for me to even attempt, very dangerous to my life or, the fetus's life if I attempted. So kids, I cannot promise. Nobody can, but for me, I know the chances of having one are very limited. It was scary because I was like, in-laws would expect grandkids. In-laws would expect a daughter-in-law that could get in the kitchen, cook in the morning, prepare. With my lupus more so, I'm very limited with that aspect of my life.
I'm the youngest of 5 siblings. I have a brother, and my parents were farmers. My mom and dad worked on the farm, and that's how I grew up as a little girl, knowing that my parents were workers on a sugarcane farm. Growing up as the youngest of a very big family made me feel very lonely in my schooling years, and I wanted to be married with lots of children so I don't have to experience loneliness again. I met my husband when I was 16, just immediately after I finished matric, and we fell in love. My wedding day was beautiful. It was amazing. It was one of the best days of my life, and everything happened very quickly. Well, I had infertility problems, and it was a very trying time in our marriage. Being 19, I didn't understand what married life was. Because my husband was much older than me, he was more caring and understanding, and everything that I know about life is what he taught me. The 4th year in our marriage, I did fall pregnant, and that I cannot explain. That was a miracle, because when I did find out that I was pregnant, initially I thought I had food poisoning, and we went to the doctor and we found out that I was actually pregnant. I was 12 weeks pregnant. And there was I can't explain what happened, neither can my gynae. So my son was born. It was the best time of our life. We had a lovely marriage for the next 10 years. And until I got sick, I had constant migraines. I was suffering with chronic headaches, which became unbearable and unexplainable by doctors. I was given morphine the whole time for my headaches and sleeping tablets to take throughout the times that I was ill. And there were days that I would sleep flat out for like 3 or 4 days. And eventually the morphine became immune to my system, and I got meningitis, and I was hospitalized. During that time that I was hospitalized, I was on life support because my body reacted adversely to the morphine that was given to me. A year prior to that, I had lost both my in-laws a year apart from each other, and on my crown birthday was my in-laws, my father-in-law's 1-year memorial service, and during that time my husband got very ill. It was 5 days after that my husband committed suicide. I think that was a turning point in my life. Being widowed was the worst thing that could have ever happened to me, and it's something that I would never ever imagine could have happened, because it was 10 beautiful years with a man that I wanted to be with and a family that I wanted to have, and within seconds that was all snatched away from me. So for an entire year, I couldn't comprehend what was happening to me. My feelings, everything that I'd felt, I hated everything happening around me. I hated the people that were there. I hated God. I hated being a wife. I hated being a mother. I hated everything. I liked nothing about life, that I would not even get up from my bed, and I didn't even want to look at my son because I felt guilty. I felt guilty that I had somehow contributed to how our lives have turned out.
My first job was with Post newspapers as a secretary to the editor, and that went quite well for a while, till I met my husband-to-be, and we married. Marriage, it was just like, one big breakdown, just for all of us. By that time, I had had 2 children, and I continued living in my marriage because I said it would work out one day, like everybody does, I'm sure. I was married for 23 years before I left. Yes. My marriage was very much one of abuse, emotional and physical. And I thought to myself that, you know, I couldn't stay in that situation any longer. Mostly because I had 2 children to worry about. And I had to get out of that situation to look after my children. Deciding factor for my leaving my husband was on the day we sat for a havan, which we normally did at the end of every month. The havan being a sacred ceremony that it is, and you know, it has so much of meaning that the mantras say that, you know, whatever I have, God, you've given me for me to use in the right way and for the betterment of everybody else. With the havan being performed with that in mind, after the havan was over, my daughter and I stood up to clear up, and then my husband asked us to sit down. So we sat down, and then he asked us what date it was on that day. And my daughter answered, and she said, the 31st of May. And he said, and what date is it tomorrow? And she said, it's going to be the 1st of June. He says, well, if you and your mother want to live here from tomorrow, you all will have to pay me rent. Being a priest, some of our duties entail giving sermons at functions or at havans. I am at the moment preparing for a Mahayajna, which is a very big havan, to be performed next week. And I've been invited to be the guest speaker. So obviously I need to research a lot of work. I refer to quite a few books, the Upanishads, the Vedas, and books by other authors as well. I wasn't financially independent. I had to rely on him. And I often wondered, if I go, where do I go and how do I go? I fulfilled my duties well. I took care of the kids. I worked in his business for him. He had a printing press, and I worked for him all the time, all my married life, till I realized that I now needed to be financially independent. And when there was a post vacant at the local school for a Hindi teacher, I applied and I got it. And that, you know, brought a little bit of financial independence into my life, because and then I was being paid for something that I was doing.
You know, my parents, despite, like I said, coming from having such humble circumstances, there was a lot of love in the home. You know, my dad was the breadwinner. I have one just brother. And my mother had a very big family. She had 7 sisters. So weekend was always about family and getting together and sharing that, you know, precious moments with loved ones. And so naturally you grow up exposed to that, and you think this is how all families are. You never think that yours is different, and you always think, you know, when you have kids, this is exactly what you want. Your cousins, your sisters, brothers all coming over, spending time watching movies together, going to the beach together. So that was my experience. And you know, it was such an eye-opener, you know, when I got married, and it was not like that. We all conditioned towards a certain expectation, And you must know your life partner is coming with his own conditioning. He's been exposed to a completely different lifestyle. And when you have a certain idea of how a marriage should be and he has a completely different one, there's bound to be a lot of disappointments. Every marriage is not filled with bad moments. I think sometimes you get two very good people, but they're just not good together. Him on his own is a good person, I on my own is a good person, but sometimes we bring out the bad qualities in each other, which does not promote happiness, that sort of thing. Sometimes there's insecurity. I was a professional, he wasn't. So, maybe it's not the best arrangement, and like I said, I'm very strong-willed. I can find my voice very easily, and I think maybe he couldn't. Abuse comes in so many forms. It's physical, the very traditional sort. You get emotional, you get psychological. You get some couples, and in my case, that was really, you get the silent treatment, somebody who just doesn't talk. They just bang doors and they just don't communicate. And I'm somebody who needed to talk. The days leading up to our actual parting, like the physical separation where he left the house, it was as a result of an abusive incident where the police had to be called. I had to call my parents, my brother, and the kids were there, and the cops came in, and you must know I'm an attorney in Chatsworth, and the cops knew me, so it was really a very, very uncomfortable situation. But by that time I was not afraid, and at that point you don't know where it's going to end up. But I think for me, that was the day that, it was like I was 100% sure I could no longer continue with the marriage. So the police came and they said, if you have him formally charged for abuse, it's a Saturday, he will have to stay in till Monday to go before a magistrate. As a lawyer, I understood that. So I felt bad because he is the father of my children. And I said, no, if he agrees to leave the house today, then I won't press charges. And I remember him taking his bag, and it really was very sad, because no matter how bad your marriage is, when you know that it's seen its last days, it's the funeral of your marriage. It is very hard, gut-wrenching, it's painful, it's excruciating, and I really wouldn't wish that on anybody. So I'm thinking I'm reliving that moment. My kids were so small at that time, and I don't think they'll remember the day, but I remember so vividly every little detail about it. But my tip for everybody, especially young people, make sure you pick the right life path. I need that decision now.
When a woman runs away from home or leaves home, she has nothing on her. So where is she going to go to? She doesn't even have the bus fare on her sometimes. I also had my trepidations about divorce. I also said, what am I doing to my family by being divorced? No one's been divorced, and I'm going to be the first person to be divorced in my family. Obviously, everyone's not going to be happy, although they didn't say so to me, but I could feel it. At that time, what mattered most was what my mom was going through. It didn't matter that what I was going through. She, at that time, held a very high position in society. She was the first ordained female priest in South Africa, an Indian female priest in South Africa. And I felt I was letting her down. So every time we spoke about it, and she said to me, make it work. And I tried my best, but it just didn't work. When I went to my mom-in-law and said to her that, I know that this marriage is ending now, and I will have to go back home to my mom. And she said, no, you're not going to your mom. You got married and you came into this home, and you're going to continue to live here. When I took my vows, when I got married, I took my vows to say that I would be the wife that was expected of me. I would be supportive to my in-laws as well. And I as a daughter-in-law, I carried out my duties. And I think I'm still doing that up till today. I'm still with my mum-in-law. So it didn't matter that I had divorced her son. What mattered to her was that I would still live with her, with my children and my grandchildren, who are now her great-grandchildren. Prayer to God and meditation is what we need in our lives to take us through to immortality. And that is why it's so important for the women to focus on prayer, to ensure that the children in the home are introduced to prayer and that they do pray every day.
After the passing of my husband, at 3 o'clock in the morning, I had to get up and I had to sit with 3 other widows without my entire family. These were strangers to me. I've never seen them before. And they had to strip me of my jewelry, of my dot, of my every religious thing that represented a married woman. And I was covered in white and I couldn't face other married women. I couldn't look at them in the eye. So, yeah, it's something very traumatic that somebody has to go through. The only people that could look at me were other widows. And for me, it was heartbreaking because I needed my family. And because all my sisters were married, they weren't allowed to sit next to me. They weren't allowed to speak to me. And I had total strangers to do these things. Your future, your entire future is taken away. Your entire life is changed just by rituals. And it's so unfair because you've never asked for this. I hated them and I hated my husband for putting me in that situation. And I couldn't understand what was going on. And for an entire year, I had to have somebody live with me because I had no control of myself and I didn't want to live anymore. I remember driving with my son in the car the one day, and I drove to a place where I was going to drive over the bridge. And I sat there and I looked at the water and I looked at my son next to me and he said, "You're going to be fine, Mommy. Don't cry. Tomorrow is going to be a better day." And I looked at him and I realized in that few seconds there's a message there. And he was my purpose to live. And I still contemplated that after he told me because I didn't think everything was going to be fine. And I sat there for 2 hours. And while we looked at the water, he reminded me that my husband's remains, his ashes, was put into a river. And he said, "Daddy's in that river." And I couldn't do it to him. So I went back home.
The challenge for any, I think, Hindu woman with any form of disability is that will society accept me as I am, or do I have to live up to society's expectations? I think we're brought up to think that if you can't live up to society's expectations, then you're good for nothing. People in conversation may have said, because depending on your religion, in some religions they say the sins of the father falls upon the son. Or yes, karma, what goes around comes around. You're paying for what you sinned for in your last life. Were you there? Do you know what sins I committed? Because I don't know. I can't answer for that. This is the life I know. This is the life I'm living, and I choose to live it the way I'm living it. How are you to judge me? Are you God? No. You're human just like me. Just because you're different doesn't mean you're being punished. Yes, the scriptures tell you, and I'm sure every scripture, any religion would tell you, you treat people the way you want to be treated. If you want to be loved and cared for, that's how you would be as a person towards everybody else. But that doesn't mean just because I'm deaf or I'm blind or I have lupus, a terminal illness, that I'm a bad person in nature. I have to pay up for my current life bad deeds or my previous birth. No, I don't believe in that.
Some people, because you're divorced, they think your morals are very low, that you don't have, you're not coming from a decent background, and that you're not living according to scripture. And that's, that is just so superficial, because you can be divorced, you can be still living a life according to Shastra, and you can be molding your children in a very Vedic way as well. But people don't see all of that. They just see the outside. Oh, you're divorced and you're probably looking for a husband, and that sort of thing. So it's a huge mentality block that you have to try and break. It's such a stereotype.
They are symbols of marriage, like the thali, the Mangal Sutra, the sindoor, the toe ring, that they adorn. But that's not the important part of the marriage. The important part of the marriage are the vows that they take. And the vows clearly state that they're taking them to be together, to have one mind, to think together. Because from the day they married, they've got to learn to think together. They're no more independent. And they've got to learn to think for the betterment of their family at first, and then the community at large. So having taken those vows, it is difficult when it comes to the point where you think about divorce. It is very difficult. But then you've got to say to yourself, I have played my part. Women are very strong. A lot of our Indians pray to Lakshmi and Saraswati and Durga, and they're supposed to be very strong. So if they can gain their strength from there and stand their ground, that's important.
The fact that many times I had taken myself to a point of suicide and it didn't happen meant that there was a purpose for me to be here, and I only took it back to being God as a reason for me to be here. And I started to listen to religious bhajans, and I started reading religious books on death and what happens when you become a widow. I started getting a deeper understanding of why I was where I was. And I started to pray again, which for a very long time I had stopped because I had lost my faith in God. And it was only when I started to pray again did I start feeling better about myself, and I started to understand the situation that I was going through. And I think it was at that point, which took me a long time to get there, but it was at that point that my life started changing.
we come from a patriarchal society. And unfortunately, a lot of that still stands strong today. It's for women to stand up and talk for themselves and to let the world know that they are capable and able to do things just as well or maybe even better than the men do them.
Finding Lord Krishna has been like a guiding light for me. And you know, this is the thing with our connection to God. It's only between you and God. So you know, they say you must water the roots and not the leaves to get the full benefit. That's what you do, because you nourish yourself when you become spiritual and when you turn to God for guidance. That's all you need.
Why was the Almighty, the most supreme being ever, grant you a sinful body? Why will He give you something so impure? God doesn't give you impurities. You create that for yourself. He gives you a person, whether they're challenged or not doesn't matter. He gives you a vessel. And what you make out of that vessel is your choice. I disagree with the point that obviously if you're on your cycle, you're unclean, you cannot pray, you cannot light your lamp. And I come from a family that's very modern. My father or mother would never stop me from going to the lamp and lifting my hands up and doing my prayer. They've never ever said, you're unclean, don't pray, or stay away. So I'm totally against things like that, because there's no way God would give you something or make you go through something in life that is purposefully sinful.
A lot of people handle divorce differently, but you know, where you can find a lot of comfort and solace is really focusing, you know, on your religion, reading whatever scripture. It can be, you know, whatever applies to you. But for me, you know, learning Bhagavad Gita, because I became, I think, a better mother. I could, you know, guide my children a little bit better, because you must know from a two-parent home, it's now one parent. So you need to know how to guide yourself before you can guide your children.
When I look back at the olden days, females were kept at home very strictly, for one thing. They weren't allowed freedom of movement, you know. They couldn't just up and go to the cinema or go wherever they wanted to. Even when there were visitors at home, they had to be in the background all the time and not come forward and speak out of turn or, you know, when they weren't expected to. I think that's changed a lot today, because today you have women who are working, they have friends at work, and a lot of them feel that they've got to attribute some of their time to their colleagues at work and to their friends, and they need to go out. I mean, today you see women visiting bars. They take their friends for a drink or so, and they're always out with family as well. They've got to learn to build that life at home. That's important.
Your role as a wife does not end the day your husband dies. Your role continues, because you're not only just a wife, you're a mother. And there's so much more that you can do. So on a daily basis, if I'm going through any adversity for the day, I get up with prayer and faith for the day. I believe that a Hindu woman, well, actually all women, whether they've been abused, whether they've faced adversity from death, widows, any woman, the thing that keeps them strong is their faith.
Now we offer our 3 samitas. Om Ayanta Idma Atma Jatave.
I've learned so much from my divorce, and I'm in a position to advise people. I have a lot of women who are just starting the divorce process. So all my life experiences come in handy to advise them and give them that inspiration and the courage they need to face. And I'm certainly not advocating divorce as a whimsy thing, you know. Certainly not to be taken lightly. I do not wish that on anybody, but it's for each individual person to know and understand, this is my point of no return, and I cannot make this work beyond this point. And the only person who can gauge that point is the person in the marriage. because to you and I, it might be something that they should tolerate and live with. But to other people who's living it, it's completely different. So I don't think society should put pressure on those people to stay and tolerate the challenges their marriage face. Every person is entitled to be free of this mental strife that marital relationships sometimes cause. And if I'm very big on pro-choice. If somebody feels comfortable staying in a rocky marriage, that's their prerogative. But if somebody is happy to be divorced and stay single their life, that is their choice as well. And if somebody who's never married before and say, well, I'm comfortable being this way, that should be their choice. Divorce is not for the faint-hearted. It's one thing having a problematic marriage, but let me tell you something, post-divorce, you have to work out arrangements for the kids. The kids' birthday, they have to decide which parent they're going to go to. Its school holidays get divided in half. You can't plan holidays away, with the kids. Everything is subject to availability. It's Father's Day, it's Mother's Day, it's my own birthday as well. So it's, we put children in difficult positions. And it's just not an easy thing. People, I think, take marriage very lightly today. If I knew then what I know now, I'd really have waited till perhaps I was 30. My kids have a very meaningful relationship with their dad, and I think the reason they have that is because obviously we got divorced, and they see the father with a lot of respect, with a lot of love, care, and appreciation, which I don't think they would have had we still been married and trudging along with our marital problems.
Marriage, there's uncertainty. It's always something you go into, and as much as you can have expectations and you can plan, you can never plan people's reactions. A person telling you, I accept you for who you are is one thing, but having to prove it is another thing. And yes, Jagan's been with me through a lot, but he hasn't personally lived with me for a period of time where I was critical. I go through phases with the lupus where I can be paralyzed for days, weeks, months. I was paralyzed for years. I lost the use of my legs, So my fear would be, what in case one day he wakes up and he realizes, I made the wrong decision, I can't take this anymore. But that's not going to stop me, because until I try, I would never know.
Remember, when they enter into marriage, they're entering into a partnership. They must afford their husbands the highest respect. They must afford their in-laws the highest respect. And as much as she's independent today, because today all women are independent financially, she's got to respect that as a very special gift, because it is a gift. And she's got to not use that as a weapon in her life.
As a woman, you play so many roles. You wear so many caps on a daily basis. You're a nurse, you're an educator, you teach not only your own children, but other children, things that you have to impart, knowledge that you have imparted, you need to impart onto them, because you're a nurturer. So you nurture any way and every way that you can.
The love of God is for everybody to grab that opportunity and build a meaningful relationship with God in whichever way you see Him. So that applies to everybody. So I think we need to be a little bit more accepting of people, and I think we should try to avoid judging other people and the decisions they've made for their lives.
The Hindu woman is the pride of her home and the protector of her family. She endures through hardship and struggle and triumphs victoriously. The power of a Hindu woman lies within her. She is the Shakti breathing life into her world.
O God, the giver of life, the remover of pains and sorrows, and the bestower of happiness, Thou art most luminous, pure and adorable. Thou art the creator of the universe. We meditate on thee, and may thou guide our intellect in the right direction. O God, the giver of life, the remover of pains and sorrows, and the bestower of happiness, thou art most luminous, pure, and adorable. Thou art the creator of the universe. We meditate on thee, and may thou guide our intellect in the right direction. O God, the giver of life, the remover of pains and sorrows, and the bestower of happiness, thou art most luminous, pure, and adorable. Thou art the creator of the universe. We meditate on thee, and may thou guide our intellect in the right direction.